test opener. I use the word test opener. We have not had a A tour for the last 20 months, I would say. That's the simple story behind a trigger or a shuffle or whatever you call it. I did not see any plan in any way. I'm being brutally honest, Bhanuka started it, and I saw Mickey Arthur also reacted to it.
I'd like to welcome you to VMAX Sports. So this is an interview where we are hoping to talk a little bit more about Sri Lankan batting. I mean, you as a former cricketer and also as a coach could give us some great ideas about what is happening to Sri Lanka at the moment. So to start off with, I would like to touch on Pathum Nissanka. His first class record, not least a first class record, is brilliant. He averaged something like 68 or something like that, and he was in West Indies. He scored a century. He was brilliant. But I remember Mickey Arthur, I think, talking about Pathum Nissanka for the very first time. He mentioned he looks at Pathum Nissanka as a all three format player, right? The T20s and all that. But if you look at his average in List A and T20 domestic, it's dreadful. I'm not a selector, but if you selectors had a simple look at those stats, I don't think they'd be sending Pathum Nissanka to play in ODIs and T20s. I mean, to be fair to him, he looked all right in Test cricket. But as a coach, do you think that was a mistake? I mean, it's ruining his own career because when you are failing in ODIs, once you go back to Test cricket, you're under pressure. It doesn't matter the format.
Also, if you look at, I mean, I gave an interview in 2019. In 2019, I said Pathum Nissanka should be our next test opener. I used the word test opener.
Yeah.
Right? He's still young. He should be playing red ball cricket. And you play him red ball cricket for 2 years, he will become a good white ball cricketer eventually. He will become a good white ball cricketer because he has that talent and he is good at it. You let him play red ball cricket for a couple of years. Once he get that international experience with red ball cricket, you bring him to white ball cricket, he will be a successful white ball cricketer. Right. That's what I would have done. But then, again, I'm not the one who takes decisions. That is my personal opinion only. My personal opinion doesn't matter to the selectors or the committees. They are the ones who are decision makers.
Now, we were talking about the youngsters. So we gave the opportunity to youngsters. I mean, we saw Charit Aslanka coming in, and then Pathum was started into the ODI team, everything. Only to 3 matches consecutively to a full shot. So, I mean, is this a problem with us? And how can this be catered? I mean, this is an area where the batting coach should look into, and there are analysis. Is that part not happening?
See, you're talking about 3 very young cricketers who are babies for international cricket, right? My question again is, were they properly prepared before they went to England? I mean, we have not had a A tour for the last 20 months, I would say. We have not gone on emerging team has not gone anywhere or had a tour for more than 2 years, I think probably about 2 years. So these guys have just played a little bit of club cricket in Sri Lanka. And then that is the only preparation these young boys had to go and face the number 1 ODI team in the world. So I'm not talking about a technical fault or anything here. Number 1, these guys, I don't think the preparation was right. Right? Number 2, yes, there is a batting coach, and that is why he's there to guide them. Yes, everyone has to everyone has to be accountable. You can't brush your hands off by saying these guys are young, they don't have experience. Yes, that's a fact. We accept that, and they will get better with experience. But then you don't need coaches. Then you only need experienced players. You put the players there, and with experience they will come good. No, that is why there are paid coaches, highly paid coaches. Again, I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just stating the fact that there are people who are professionally there to guide them. So these young cricketers should get guidance, more guidance, and especially when there is not much preparation, the guidance should be much more than when you are very well prepared.
Wanindu, in terms of runs, especially in the ODI series in England, he has been our best, top scorer. He scored 100 runs, a 50 here and there. And, he was good. But then again, we all witnessed how he struggled against the short pitch ball. Not that he struggled, it's like it was more of a trap. He was scoring runs off the short ball as well. But then again, for some reason, he somehow got out playing the full shot or the hook shot. So, as a coach, what you could say about?
Well, first of all, we need to identify what Wanindu's role is in the team. Wanindu is certainly not playing as a top order bat, right? And what Wanindu gives us with bat for me is a bonus, right? He's actually, what we expect from him is for us to get some wickets and do, yes, and as a bowling all-rounder, he's certainly not a batting all-rounder. As a bowling all-rounder, batting at 7, obviously he had no choice but to bat at number 4 and 5 in a couple of games because there were no other batsmen available. But what we look at is for him to bowl his 10 overs, get us a couple of wickets, and then he has bat at number 7, sometimes 8 maybe, and give us some runs when it's needed.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, he was out there in the 10th over in almost all games, right? So, what we need to find out first is, I've known Wanindu since he was a schoolboy because I was involved with the Sri Lanka under-19 when in the 2015 World Cup, and all these boys, Wanindu, Avishka, Nairu Kumara, Asita Fernando, Charith Asalanka was the captain. So almost all these guys has been working with me since 2015 and then later on with the A team. So I don't think Wanindu has ever batted so high up. Even in that under-19 World Cup, we used him at number 7, right? So number 1, he's not used to batting so high up. And I don't think he has ever batted at number 4, or he has gone into bat in the 10th over when the team was down 20 for 4.
Yeah.
So I think it's more like for him, I don't see a technical issue in that. But yes, when someone is getting out in the same fashion continuously, yes, then that issue should be addressed, because in time, I think he can be a very, very good, he's already becoming a very good all-rounder, and in time, he could be one of those match winners for Sri Lanka with ball and bat both.
Yeah.
So I think it's important at a very early stage. I think he must be not more than 24 plus. So it's important at this stage for him to guide him properly, and if there is a technical fault, to correct it. And it's important for him as a player to learn from the mistakes and not repeat it over again. So yes, it was a trap. The short ball was a trap, and he got out, I think, 2 or 3 times continuously, which should have been addressed, which should have been sorted out during the tour itself, I thought.
Cricketer movements have become a huge part of modern day batting, especially if you look at players like Hashim Amla, Kevin Pearson. They have had really successful careers, and trigger movements were just a big part of their batting. And now with Avishka Fernando, like twice we saw him trying to play across the line against the new ball, and he got out like in a pretty much identical fashion. In terms of trigger movements, do you think Avishka needs an adjustment?
Well, see, from where I am sitting, I can't say that. You need to be hands-on, and it differs. You cannot have something like inside a box saying that this guy needs a trigger movement, this guy doesn't need a trigger movement. And a trigger movement or a shuffle or initial movement, whatever you call it, it is just a movement. But you need to understand why batsmen make a trigger move. do a trigger or a shuffle or initial movement. To me, it's just something that you give yourself an extra second to prepare yourself to receive the ball. That's simple. That's the simple story behind a trigger or a shuffle or whatever you call it. And it differs from player to player. Some go back and across. Basically, some do 1 and 2, some do 1, 2, 3, some do 1, 2, 3, 4. So it depends. It depends. The word depends. I use a lot in my coaching, because you can't be in a box and you can't. Every batsman cannot do the same thing just because someone else is successful. You should not do a trigger movement because, like you said, Hashim Amla was comfortable, successful, or Kohli was successful, or someone else was successful in doing a trigger movement. It is because every player, every human body is different to each and every one. For an example, I'm 6 feet tall, right? And if you talk about someone like Wanindu or Charita Salanka, must be not more than 5'6", right? So what I can do, probably they can't do because I have an advantage of the height. At the same time, they are short in stature and their eye line is much more in a better position than someone who's tall, right? So it differs from player to player. But you need to understand where your head position is. That is the most important thing in cricket, not even in batting. In cricket, when you're bowling, when you're fielding, when you're batting, your head position, that is your camera. For an example, if you shake the camera phone and take a photo, the photo is going to be blur, right? So if your head is not in a good position, and if your head is moving about at the time of the bowler releases the ball, then your vision can be blur, and your head position might be in an awkward way where your vision is not 100% good. So these are the things you actually have to look at. And if you are doing a trigger, since you asked me, the timing of the trigger movement or the initial movement is very, very important. Like I said, the trigger movement is something that you get ready before the bowler bowls the delivery. Bowler releases the ball from your hand. And at that point, if you are still doing your trigger, that means you're not ready, you're still getting ready. I mean, you're facing bowlers who are about 130, 135 plus. If you don't get your trigger movement timing right, then you're going to struggle. So it differs. It depends. It differs from player to player. Whether you need a trigger movement or you don't need a trigger movement is totally up to the player. And if the player is confused, that is why coaches are there to guide them to do the right thing.
Right. So, I mean, there's one more player that I'd like to talk about, based on the performance in England. That is Osunda Fernando. Now, Osunda, like when he was playing in Pakistan in the T20s and also in South Africa, like he looked perfect. He looked like the man for the future. And then all of a sudden, after, I think he had an injury as well. But during this England tour, at the T20 and the ODI, he looked like a man who was like really struggling. Especially in the T20, he was trying all sorts of things, but nothing seemed to be working. And in the ODI also, like he was trying to do stuff, but it didn't really come off. So my question is, now we have seen what he's capable of. He's a brilliant player. So for a player to be able to, to come to a point like this, where you are really struggling, is it according to you, is it because of the technique or the current form, or is it the pressure? I mean, as a former player and a coach, what's your thought?
I think, see, there's very rarely you have an issue with your technique at the top level. To get to national level, you have to be good and you have to perform to a certain level, better than the other guys. That's why you get to the top level. So if you do have a bad technique, it doesn't. I don't think that you can get to the top level. So it's not a technical issue. I think it's a tactical issue. That's what I saw from watching from Sri Lanka, watching the match on TV. That's what I saw. Again, I can't 100% tell you what the issue is, but just the little bit of what I saw was it was a tactical issue. I saw I mean, if you are talking about a particular over, which is very ugly to watch, Vokes was basically bowling about a foot and a half outside the off stump, back of the length. He had his mid on and mid off up, and he had his sweeper cover and third man back. And it was quite obvious he was not going to bowl one right in front. He was going to be on the hard length. What we call hard length is back of the length, where you can't come to the front foot. You have to adjust yourself. So did Osanda make that adjustment when he saw that field? I think the tactical thing that he was trying to do was he was just trying to hit over mid on, mid off, and mid wicket. That's exactly where the fielders were up, and obviously Vokes were not going to give him a freebie right up to his feet to hit him over mid on or mid off. So he was basically 2 feet outside the off stump, back of the length, and in my books, Osanda Sudha tried to play on the offside rather than just trying to do exactly what England wanted him to do. So I don't think it's a technical issue. I think it's more of a tactical issue. The tactics that he used in that particular over especially was the wrong tactic. Again, if the boy is confused, these are young players, and sometimes they need guidance when you're playing with the number 1 team in the world. I think lack of planning was more of an issue than anything else. If you're talking about that particular period of that particular game.
Previously, you mentioned, Avishka, about this tactical decision as an individual that you have to make. So maybe before the game, you might prepare for Chris Vokes, Dilip and Sam Curran.
No, when I say tactical, Harsha, tactical goes to individual and team tactics as well. The tactic comes only for individual. How you go out there and handle bowling in the middle is up to particular individual. But then there has to be a team tactic. What are you going to do? I mean, in England, I'll keep it without going into individuals. I'll try and see the bigger picture. I mean, in England, we all know the ball is going a little bit early. And I didn't see a drastic movement as well. It's just for first 4 or 5 overs, the ball moved, and which that 4 or 5 overs, even in Sri Lanka, the ball will move that much anywhere in the world with the new ball, right? So what was the team tactics? Were we going to go after those 4 overs trying to sacrifice a couple of wickets, or we were going to just see out those 4 or 5 overs, make sure you don't lose any wickets, and once the ball stopped moving, then we could have capitalized. So I would say England is one of the easy places to score runs now with the white ball, especially. I mean, if you take scores in the last, even going back to 24 months or even last 3 years, always England has been a high-scoring place, except probably certain venues when it rains. If the wicket is touch green, that's a different story. But we didn't see green tops at all with us. It's all quite good batting tracks. I mean, to be very honest. And so what was the tactics? What are the team tactics? By the 10th over, we were 4 down. And by the 10th over, when we were 4 down, we 50% lost the game. Absolutely. And it was all damage control after that. So it's important to know what the team tactics were. I mean, it didn't look like they were going to see off the first few overs the way they were going after bowling. So it's important to know. I mean, it's you can't analyze without knowing what was going in their minds.
So, I mean, just to stress a little bit more on that. Now, you said that was the team tactics. You prepare in a certain way. But once you get to the middle level, particularly with Osanda's situation where Chris Vokes started bowling slow ball on a good length, I think in that moment it was more of an individual decision, right? You as an individual, you have to make the choice.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go there. You got to go there, and you can't go there with only one plan in your mind. You need to change in the middle because the bowler also come with a plan. I mean, he doesn't come without a plan. So if you go with only one plan and that plan doesn't work, then you're lost. Because you need to have plan A and plan B as an individual, as a team. If this plan doesn't work, then we need to fall back to another plan. There should be a fallback plan. So to me, I mean, it was very disappointing to see I did not see any plan in any way, or the individual or as a team.
With all these things happening around him in social media, I mean, Banu obviously gave an interview where he criticized the national coach, and then the coach also said that Banu was a sloppy cricketer. So as a player, as a player, and also as a coach, I'm pretty sure you may have seen situations like this where a certain cricketer is not in favor of a coach. So I mean, would it be very difficult for them to work together again?
Well, my take on that is you don't watch dirty linen in public. Very simple. I mean, I'm being brutally honest. Bhanuka started it, and I saw Mickey Arthur also reacted to it. You don't watch dirty linen in public. If there's an issue, there are people who you can talk to. If there are differences, there are people who you can go and talk and do those issues. You don't do that on social media. The exact question you asked me is the same question. Millions of people who on social media who are looking at this. How can he, if he gets picked, how can he now go and work with the coach?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is exactly my point. You don't watch dirty linen in public. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm being brutally honest. I'm totally against these people putting up saying that I passed the fitness test. Okay, I did 2 kilometers, and even certain websites carrying out saying that this Scott did the fitness test. These guys passed. These guys failed. I'm totally against. It's all. You don't need those things in public. You don't need to. I mean, we did fitness tests. Our fitness test was never out there in the paper or in social media or in any websites. So I'm totally. I'm sorry. I might be old-fashioned.
Yeah.
But I'm totally against all these things that's happening inside the team coming out on social media. I mean, there are things that happen when we were playing. We take those secrets to our grave.
Exactly.
Right? So that's one way of bonding the team together. So that's how you trust each other. It seems like when these things come out, even that video regarding these 3 guys, I don't know, it's outsider who has recorded or whatever, but it's still these are things that should not come out.
Yeah.
These are things that as a team you deal with it.
We have to look at another angle. Mickey Arthur, now he has been in Sri Lanka over nearly 1.5 years, and the results haven't been great. A lot of people are talking about like his influence. I mean, I have seen former cricketers, especially Dilshan. I thought he said like seems like a waste of money and waste of time that we are consulting. We are taking the service of foreign coach. So, I mean, with decision to bring in Bhanuka, does that send out a message like Mickey Arthur's days are numbered?
Well, I'll ask you a question. I'll answer the question with a question. If you were working for a private company or if you're in a corporate company, when you take his 2 years performance, you think you'll keep him in your company?
Absolutely not.
That's one question I'm asking you. The second question I'm asking you, if it was a local coach who was in that position who had performed like that, you think they will tolerate the local coach for so long?
Absolutely.
So I'm answering this question with 2 questions to you, and you give me that answer. If these performances was there for 2 years in a corporate, will that corporate keep him? If a local coach performed like this, will the local coach survive for that long? Very simple. I'm not saying anything, but because the decisions are taken by the committees and Sri Lanka cricket and all that.
Yeah.
We are not the ones who are making decisions, and it's unfair for us to comment on it. But as well, and as being a coach who is a coach, it's not right to comment on these. But I think I gave you what to think about in just 2 questions that I asked you.
Exactly. So finally, one last question, Avishka, before we wind it up. It's about Dimuth Karunaratne. Now, since this ODI series, a lot of people have started speaking about Dimuth because, to be very fair, Dimuth as a batsman, if you look at his record from 2019 World Cup, I think as an ODI cricketer, he has the best batting average and consistency as well, because he has only failed like 4 times. Rather than that, he would always score a 30, 40, 50, and he would see off the new ball as well, especially in English conditions. Like he was brilliant. So now there's a lot of talk about bringing him back to at least not to captain or at least to bat, because the performance in England, especially the openers, were dreadful. So as a former opener and a coach, do you think that would be the solution for Sri Lanka cricket moving forward?
Well, again, we are going out of the policy. I mean, they took a policy decision saying that we are going to go with young cricketers, and we are going to go with them till the T20 World Cup or till the 2023 World Cup or whatever. Then you stick to that policy. Whether you win or lose, you stick to that policy. But as the results comes, the policies keep changing. You can't do that. I mean, I'm not saying Dimuth should play. I'm not saying Dimuth shouldn't play. But what I'm saying is, if the selectors and the committees, all these guys took a decision, a policy decision, then you stick to it.
Yeah.
If your policy, you take a policy decision and that goes wrong, then you can't change it overnight. It is unfair on the players. It is unfair on the younger players also.
Absolutely.
I mean, you just go out there and put them out there. I mean, inexperienced boys. So, I mean, I don't know, so many debutants were there. And I mean, if you take, I mean, I saw in one game, there was only Kusal Janit who has scored ODI hundreds. No one else.
Yeah.
So that sort of a young team, it's not fair on them also then.
Yeah.
So you take a policy decision. I think that has been a huge problem.
About these decisions, if the selection committee or the coaches take a decision that they need to stick by the decisions. Now, I think when they brought out this, concept of going with a new team, a young team, they told that the captaincy, they are checking Kusal Janit only for 2 series. I mean, they'll be giving the captaincy for him for 2 series, and then we'll trial out how it goes. So we saw what happened in his first series, and we saw what happened in his second series. I mean, the answer is he failed. So will they now look at another captain? And if the captain fails in the Indian series, I mean, we know it's a very tough series as well. So again, will that go on changing captains?
So again, the policy decision, isn't it? I think. Look here. I think when you select a captain, you choose a leader. You don't just haphazardly choose someone to lead the side, to go there and think, okay, he's the most senior player, so therefore we'll captain him. Then Muralidharan should have captained long time ago. I mean, he was one of the most senior players. On top of it, then why did they make Mahela the vice captain at a very, very young age? When there was all the other senior guys were there. There was Sanath, there was Muri, there was Vasi, there were so many other senior guys. But I think in 2000, I can't remember exactly when it was, they took a decision to make Mahela vice captain at a very young age because they saw him as a leader, as a captain material. So it's not about making the most senior player as the captain and telling him, okay, we'll give you 2 series. If you do well, we'll make you captain. No, I don't think that's the right way. Again, my opinion only. Right? People who really matter has to look at it they look at it in a different way. But my opinion is, when you are selecting the captain, you look at number 1, leadership qualities. Number 2, whether he's captain material. Number 3, whether the players trust him. Number 4, whether he has the respect of the players. These are the qualities you look at when you appoint a captain. I am not putting Kusal Janit down. I'm not saying he's a bad captain. I'm just saying when you are selecting a captain, you need to look at 4 main qualities. Again, I'll tell you. 1, whether he's a leader. Number 2, whether the players trust him. Number 3, whether he has the control and the ability to get the best out of the players. These are the main qualities you look at when you appoint a captain, not how many matches you have played. So I hope I answered that question, but again, whether they change the captain or not, I don't know. But I hope they take a decision. If it's a policy decision, by all means, stick to it.